Lawn care probably isn't the first thing that you think about when you think about backyard ecology. Honestly, it isn't for me either. But it is something that most of us have to deal with in one way or another, whether we are doing it ourselves or hiring someone to do it for us. And I don't know about you, but lawn care equipment in general, much less battery-powered lawn equipment, is not my area of expertise. That's why when I heard about a landscaping company which specializes in low-impact lawn care and that has transitioned to all battery-powered equipment, I became intrigued. Anthony and I have some battery-powered lawn care equipment, but we've always shied away from battery-powered lawnmowers. We just didn't think battery-powered lawnmowers could handle our uneven, rough, hilly yard. But if this company was using all battery-powered equipment on a commercial scale, then maybe we needed to rethink our assumptions for our own yard. Maybe you're in a similar boat and are trying to decide if battery-powered is the way to go for your next piece of lawn care equipment. Or maybe you'd like to be able to hire someone who approaches lawn care from a more ecological perspective, but you don't know how to find that person or the questions to ask. If so, then this episode is for you. Nature isn't just out there in some far-off exotic location. It's all around us, including right outside our doors. Hi, my name is Shannon Trimboli, and I am the host of Backyard Ecology. I invite you to join us as we ignite our curiosity and natural wonder, explore our yards and communities, and improve our local pollinator and wildlife habitat. Hi, everyone. Before we get started, I want to thank all of my supporters on Patreon. Their monthly donations help make Backyard Ecology possible. If you would like to join them, you can do so for less than the cost of a cup of coffee or a meal at your favorite fast food place. I'll have links in the show notes for the Backyard Ecology Patreon page, blog, YouTube channel, and email list. Today we are talking to Richard McCoy. Richard is the owner and operator of McCoy Horticultural Services, and in the last couple of years, his business has transitioned from the traditional gas-powered lawn care equipment that we all use to battery-powered equipment. Hi, Richard. Welcome to Backyard Ecology. Thank you for talking with us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because your area of expertise is one that I don't really know a lot about. So I'm going to get to learn right along with our listeners, which is always fun for me.
Great.
But before we get started, can you tell everyone just a little bit about what you do and how you got interested in sustainable lawn care?
Sure. So I didn't actually grow up with a family that really wanted to be involved in it. I mean, we were outdoors, beach and things like that, and vegetable garden, but not really to the level that I've taken it to now. But so in the early 90s, I started in the industry as an arborist, as a climber and an applicator. And, my job card at that point said, we used to go drive with 1,000-gallon spray rig, and the job card would say, spray the tree canopy for leaf chewing and sucking insects. So the story that I tell is a story of redemption, right? Because I'm going back from the back in the day when we started up to where we are now. And in 1998, I started our company, Richard McCoy Horticultural Services, and we started as a conventional gas-powered invasive species planting, non-native planting, all the things that we're trying to get people not to do is how we started our business. Which, in hindsight, it gives us a good reference point because we know that you can take a conventional landscape company and transition it to one that's ecological, organic, and one that uses low impact battery powered equipment, which is where we're at today. And that transition started around 2005 when we started seeing some things in our landscapes where, some of the plant material didn't look great. The foliage wasn't great. The leaf size wasn't great. Color wasn't great. Things just weren't working the way we thought they should. And right around that point, I went to a class by a group called NOFA, the Northeastern Organic Farming Association. And what that did, it opened my eyes to a whole nother way of looking at the landscape, where we start with soil biology first. And when you start with soil first, and that old saying, the right plant, right place, All those things are the things that make the difference. Because when you look at it in a vacuum and you go to a big box store and you say, "Oh, I like that plant," you just go throw it in your landscape. It may work, it may not work, but chances are it's not going to work and you're going to be unhappy. So what we started to do at that point is we started using a product called Biopack, which was a synthetic fertilizer with a little bit of biology in it. It had some bacteria in it. And once we started spraying that out onto the landscape, we noticed that things started looking better. So along with that NOFA class and this new ecological or bacterial count in this product, I realized that there's something bigger going on. And we started to explore the soil and soil biology. And then we went from there. Then we started organics. The native plant ecological things sort of went right along with it. We started doing green infrastructure, which, rain gardens and things like that, about 7 years ago. And in 2020, we started our transition away from gas powered equipment to battery powered maintenance equipment, which is where we're at today. Long story short.
I really like that story, though, because like you said, it is a story of, you called it redemption. I would say it's learning, and how we start at one place with what we know. And then as we learn better, we do better. And I think that really is an important concept, is that we are always learning, always improving, hopefully.
Mhm.
And we do make those adjustments, and we've all made mistakes in the past. And usually they're mistakes because we didn't know any better.
Right.
And then as we learn and grow, we can change what we're doing and we can do better. And yeah, I really like that story. I think it's a great story.
Yeah, it's like if you look at, the idea of using, manure or compost, before I started looking at things the way we do now, we did it because, well, it was the thing to do and it was a good thing, right? We didn't know that the reason why it actually works is because there's biological activity that's happening between that organic matter and the soil and the plants. And that's really what makes it work, not just the idea of throwing compost or manure on. There's a whole thing going on underneath your feet that nobody pays attention to. So once you realize that, it makes your life a whole lot easier.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we always want the simple answer,
Mm.
but sometimes the simple answer leads us to, like you said, just doing it because that's the thing to do. Whereas if we take the time to kind of learn some of the deeper levels with it, then it starts to make more sense as to the why it's happening. And once you understand the why it's happening, you get a better idea of how to apply it in real life. Because I don't know about you, but real life for me never follows the rules that it's supposed to follow.
No, usually not. And then when you ask why, you're going to continue to ask why.
Mhm. And then you go deeper and deeper down the rabbit
Yep,
hole.
yep, exactly. Which is good, because then I noticed too, the other thing about the transition to organics and ecological is that when I was doing things conventionally, I was very much in a rut of doing things just because, like I said, just because you do it without really looking at the why. And once we started looking at the why, again, that opened up a whole nother realm of possibilities to how we're going to maintain our landscapes, which, now it's like, I don't step outside without learning something, because it never ends. And it's great. It's a fantastic way to, I couldn't have chosen a better path if somebody put me on it. I mean, it's a great place to be. I'm thrilled with the vocation I have. I love my work. I love the clients we have, my employees. It's a really good place. Don't want to paint too much of a pretty picture because it's still a business and you have headaches, but it's a good path for sure.
Right. It's always better when you love what you do. And it sounds like you love what you do. So that's always the best part.
Yep, totally.
Well, one of the reasons why I really want to talk with you today, and I mean, obviously, just based on the couple of minutes we've been talking, we could go down so many different rabbit holes. And I'm sure we probably will go down lots of little rabbit trails here. But one of the ones that I want to kind of kick off with is talking about that transition from those traditional gas powered equipment to more of the battery and electric powered equipment.
Mhm.
Because I think that's something that's becoming more and more mainstream, at least on the individual level and the homeowner levels. I'm not sure how much on the commercial level yet, but at least I think more people are looking at it. And I know that we've got a little bit of personal experience with it. Anthony's been using either battery powered or electric weed around the house for quite a few years now. A couple of years ago, he got a battery powered chainsaw that he now uses for everything that he can possibly use it for. I mean, if he has to get out the big chainsaw, he does, but it's because we need the extra power, or the extra length with it. So we've got a little bit of experience, but nothing compared to what I'm sure you have, being that you guys are using it every single day on just a wide variety of yards. So I think that's a lot of experience and knowledge that could help a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, so it is becoming more mainstream in the industry. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard around the country there are gas backpack blower bans in certain areas of the country. And one of the areas I work in, our work is in the Princeton, New Jersey area and surrounding areas around Princeton. And Princeton, New Jersey actually has a ban, and Montclair does, another town in New Jersey. So there's a lot of that going on, and that's part of the unfortunate thing about that is, as far as electric equipment goes, everything. I mean, we use 33-inch walk behinds. We have 48-inch stand-on battery powered equipment, string trimmers, chainsaw, like you mentioned. We have a full suite of electric tools where we can do our commercial, residential landscape maintenance in a very high efficient and high aesthetic way that we can do this. So again, the biggest problem is the backpack blowers. Typically, what I say to people is they are twice the price at half the output. Right? They just haven't caught up yet, and unfortunately, that's the tool that has the bullseye on it, and that's part of the education in that transition that we like to share with other contractors and homeowners. I mean, it's going to take a village to get this done, and it's not for everybody. It's not for every landscape contractor is not going to jump on it like we did. There's certainly some pushback in the industry. But again, that's part of the education. The landscape contractors in general don't really understand the capabilities of the electric tools, and they're very capable. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. So with the group, the American Green Zone Alliance that I work with, AGZA, we work to educate municipalities, contractors, not-for-profits, anybody that's interested in making a transition from transitional gas powered equipment to electric, and also ecological and organic land care. We're also taking on that component as well at this point. But education is key. And then when it comes to the bans and things like that, like I just mentioned, and if they are going to start to take away the opportunities for the contractors, the education, like I've mentioned repeatedly, and also funding, because it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's in one of my talks, I have a slide where I show if let's say a 22-year-old kid wanted to start a landscape business, he could do it for about $30,000. You can get a truck, a used truck, a trailer, a used mower, and tools, and go start a landscape business. Whereas if he wanted to jump in full boat electric, like we have the electric tools, like I mentioned, we have a solar trailer, 1.6 kilowatt solar trailer, so that all our stuff is charging on the fly. That's an $80,000 to $100,000 opportunity expenditure there. So there's a big difference, and there's a big learning curve. So there's a lot. But for the homeowner, there's no reason why electric tools can't do the job, because most of them, most of those tools are built. If you get the right ones, again, I'll mention AGZA again. If you go to agza.net, one thing AGZA does is we certify the tools that we use. There's a handful of professional tools that if a homeowner went on that website, they're AGZA certified, which means they've been out into the desert, tested them out in the desert, so they can take the heat, they can take the cold, they can take the workload capacity of a commercial contractor, so they would be perfectly suitable for a homeowner to pick up and use without any issues.
That's one of the things that we've always kind of thought about too with it, is really trying to figure out what those realistic applications are for it. Because I mean, there are going to be times and situations where the gas powered is needed, because like you said, the electric just hasn't caught up yet. I mean, we've got areas on our property, because we've got about 39.5 acres. And part of our property, it's wood. So part of it's not getting mowed, part of it's old fields, and a small part of it's kind of the more traditional yardy type area.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yeah, we're not going to get rid of the gas powered bush hog. That's not going to happen.
Right.
We're going to need the gas powered chainsaw. Now, some things, like I said, we can get by just fine with the electric chainsaw on most of it.
Mm-hmm.
But like even with the more yard type area, it's not flat, it's not smooth, it's not something that you would see in a typical suburban, urban, well manicured yard. That's not ours. It's made up of what most people would consider weeds. It's whatever grows in the yard and is green. That's it. So it's clover, it's fescue, it's Johnson grass that's come in from the fields. It's you name it, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's just kind of a little bit of everything. And so we've always gone, well, would an electric powered even work in
Mm-hmm.
those type of areas? So it's trying to figure out what those situations are that where it does work and where it doesn't work. And so can you give us some of those, give us some guidelines for homeowners out there? And again, remembering that some people are going to have yards like ours, some people are going to have the nice, well manicured suburban urban lot, and we're talking anything realistically anything across the country, but mostly we're looking at Eastern US. So more like what you're probably used to as far as climate and stuff as well.
Yeah, so this is the beauty about what we do, because we don't look at the landscapes that we manage, and if your listeners too will, they're all going to be different, like you mentioned, and we don't look at them like they're a carbon cookie cutter cutout. They're all different. So you know obviously what we do, and I'm going to have to relate this from my personal experience with my clients, and hopefully what I'm saying relates to the people that are listening. Is when I walk onto a property, I listen to what our clients are looking for, and at the same time, I'm making an assessment of problematic areas, right? Like areas you're describing, areas that have a lot of trees, or areas where the landscape is rough and not smooth. It's shady, you can't get grass to grow. Um, and those problematic, quote unquote, air fingers quote, problematic areas are the areas that we address with native plants. So we take away, if somebody's trying to grow lawn in that space where you can't grow lawn and grow it effectively without throwing grass seed on it every year and trying to fertilize it and do all those things that you have to do to a manicured lawn. Once you take away those problematic areas, then and you're incorporating native plants, then that area of high manicured maintenance becomes smaller. If you had a 15,000 square foot lawn, that area maybe now is reduced to 7,500, and those perimeter areas that are troublesome are now an ecological, you know beautiful place to be, where you're calling in all the pollinators and beneficials. And the benefit of that is then you start calling in these beneficial wasps and things like that will take care of the grubs in your lawn. It's We haven't put down grub control since 2005, because when you start to work with this ecology and you're working with the systems that are in place, that everything just seems to work. So like I said, every property is different. You have to look at problematic areas first, and electric will work in any circumstance. For example, when we first got our 48-inch stand-on mower, one of the first things I did is I took it through high wet grass to see how it would cut it, and and it bogged down just like a gas mower would. Now the difference between a gas mower and the 48-inch battery powered mower is that instead of hearing that engine bogged down on a gas mower, you have LED lights that signal green is good, yellow is something's up, and red is you better stop, because you're overloading that system. So I watched the LEDs, and sure enough, it got yellow and turned to red, and I slowed down just like you would with a regular mower. And once the deck caught up, once the blades caught up, then it was fine to go again. So I equate the electric use of equipment to the difference between driving a manual shift and an automatic shift in an automobile. It's basically the same process. It's just a different way of looking at it. So like I said, just about any place you can manage with gas, you can use electric, as long as the equipment is suitable for that space. And again, looking at those problematic areas, removing those problematic areas, adjusting them accordingly to the culture of that space, and again, right plant, right place, making sure that the plants that you're putting in that problematic space suit that area. Do soil testing, check your pH, check your organic matter, do all those things and make sure that your plants and your location you're putting them in are appropriate. Um, but yeah, I mean, you can do anything with electric that you can with gas for the most part.
I mean, I agree. We're not trying to mow anywhere near that whole 39 and a half acres. We probably don't even mow half an acre of it, quite honestly. And that probably should be mowed more often than we do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. That's one of the things too. I mean, we're not built as a lawn mowing company. My first, my heart is in native plants. So if I was, take Benjamin Vogt for example, if I can make my clients' yards like Benjamin Vogt's yards, I would make them all native plants with no lawns. But that's, we have a built up 60-year aesthetic that people need to adjust to instead of just pulling everybody's lawns out of the way. You got to slowly, like I said, take those perimeter areas, turn them into natives. Then you have those cues for care of a maintained lawn area that shows people that you do care,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the perception is if you have a long, wild, maintained property that you don't care, when in actuality you probably care more because you're doing things more for ecology than you are if you just had a lawn. Um, but that's it's just it's a big learning curve on both the industry and the general public to understand how we need to transition away from that 60-year-old model that was put in place by petrochemical companies promising a weed-free, bug-free property.
And like you said, I mean, you're also taking into account the client's
Mm-hmm.
needs and interests. And so we've all got different aesthetic views and interests, but then it's also what are they, you mentioned the other land uses.
Mm-hmm.
And I get asked all the time questions like, I want to start moving to native plants and make this more ecologically friendly in my yard. What can I plant that my 3 dogs and 5 grandkids or 5 kids can run around and play in all the time? And I'm like, that area's yard. That your best bet for that area is going to be regular turf grass. Now, look around the rest of it and we can look at other places, but turf grass has a role, I think, in landscapes, depending on what the land use is. It's just not the only answer.
Right. Yeah, the European aesthetic of all lawn up to your front door is long gone at this point.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in some areas anyway.
Yeah, some areas, and hopefully it's going to become more and more gone,
Yeah, true,
and
true.
less the primary aesthetic. But yeah, that's exciting to hear that the batteries powered and electric equipment can do anything that the gas did. I mean, I always thought that, and maybe I'm still working under an old assumption that the electric, especially when it got to mowers, hadn't
Mm.
quite caught up to the gas yet. But it sounds like from what you're saying that it has, and it's primarily just the leaf blowers that it's still a little bit lagging behind.
That's absolutely true. And the thing with the leaf blowers too is we touched on bans at the onset, and what the most prudent way for if it's a municipality or a state, if they do need to regulate this, what they need to understand is like I mentioned, there are times like and like you mentioned, there are times when you do need that extra power with a gas backpack blower. And like I mentioned in Princeton, what they did with their regulation is they allow it's a window of opportunity to use a gas backpack blower in the spring from I think March 15th to April 15th, June 1st, and then you can't use them at all through the summer because it's really not necessary. And then you can use them again October 15th. I want to say to November 15th, December 15th, something. I forget what that window is exactly. So because they do realize that the capability of the gas backpack blower just isn't there yet. So they do allow contractors to do that, and that's a great compromise. Instead of being heavy-handed, to allow contractors to be able to transition and also have the general public start to see that the landscape industry does care about what they're doing and does care about the opinions of people that we're working around.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't use backpack blowers or leaf blowers really at all. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really aware, and I can make some guesses as to, because of the time frames that you said, as to why the gas might work in the early spring and the fall rather than the electric. But in case there's others out there that aren't real sure and going, well, why is it allowed at all, or why is it up to
Mm.
Why can the electric work sometimes and not others? Can you give us a little bit of an explanation there as to the whys?
Yeah, so I guess I'm speaking specifically from a reference of the Northeast, where there's heavy leaf cover. If you're in Southern California or Southern Florida, where you don't have that heavy leaf fall in the fall, um, then you may not need it. And like I said, it's really only those windows of heavy leaf fall and when it's wet and it gets very difficult to move any volume of leaves. Which again, if you reduce your lawn size and increase your bed size, you have areas to put leaves, so you don't need to blow as much. So everything's sort of interconnected, not only human wise, but environmentally and ecosystem wise. So it's really just that. It's really the location and regionality of where you're doing your cleanup. Um, and that's not to say too that we don't use, we'll use rakes too if our client would like us to. But I think it's important too for folks to remember that if you're running a business, you're running a business to profit. And that's again the workload capacity in the fall for battery powered backpack blowers specifically is not what it is with gas blowers. Now, with that said, we minimize the amount of gas blower use because what we'll do is we'll use a yard sweeper on the back of one of our mowers, right? So we will use a gas blower, but we're trying as much as possible not to use the gas blowers, even if they're allowed. Um, just because that's our model, right? Our model is to be as forward thinking as possible. And that's where that's taken us. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I'm just sort of trying to, the regionality is important. Not looking at things exactly the way they should be and trying to look at alternatives is how we approach things. So yeah, I think it's mostly the regionality of it. When I describe those windows of backpack blower use, it's northeast and eastern northern tier of the United States. Any place where there's a lot, essentially any place where there's a lot of trees where leaves are going to fall in the fall.
So it's because the leaves are heavy and wet, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's not. It's just harder to move them, even with a rake.
right.
So if somebody was looking at kind of transition, and let's think more homeowner here,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, how would they go about picking what they need? What do they need to look at and kind of weigh those different aspects?
Obviously, charging capabilities. You need to be careful. How you're going to charge your batteries because there are issues with lithium batteries, as we know, catching on fire. So you need to be careful of that. Um, so when you're selecting your tools, you may need an extra battery to make sure that depending upon the size of your property, you may need an extra battery so that you don't have to recharge during the middle of your work. But with that said, you always need to make sure that if you're charging, you unplug everything when you're not paying attention to it, because the last thing you want to do is leave it plugged in. There are devices commercially available that do that for you, but it's not something that a homeowner would do. So it's basically you look at the scale and scope of your property and think about what you need to accomplish in your given amount of time. Is it a walk behind mower? Is it a larger? I mean, you can get a larger, if you go to the big box stores, I think now they have larger battery powered ride-ons. So those are also available for homeowners now too. String trimmers, same thing. They're just as good as any gas piece of equipment. String trimmers. So it really just boils down to how involved they want to get and what their cost threshold is. Because if they do want to go with something bigger that's commercial, it may cost them a little more money, but they're going to get a much longer duration and return on investment with a contractor. A contractor like I mentioned, the AGSA AFT certified. If you go with one of those pieces of equipment, I mean, we have them in our workforce where they're 3 years old at this point, and they're still going like the day we purchased them. And just to reference commercial, right? Again, commercial landscape contractors will buy a gas string trimmer, and in 2 years they're throwing it out, right? So with the battery, and now with a homeowner, again, a gas string trimmer might last 5 or 6 years, but nevertheless, you start to down to that time frame where it starts to get old. You're pulling the pull cord, changing spark plugs, changing this and that, clean the carburetor, and all those things. So it's definitely definitely an easier maintenance item, and you'll get your return on investment pretty quick. Um, you know, for us, it's about 3 years on some of the equipment. The bigger stuff is 5 years. For homeowner, it's going to be relatively. It'll be longer because you're not going to use it as much, but it's going to last you. I mean, if we have them and they've lasted 3 years, I could see no reason why a homeowner wouldn't have it for 15 and not have an issue at all. So yeah, I mean, it's scope, size of property, budget, whatever a homeowner's budget allows, the amount of pieces of equipment, mower, string trimmer, blower, shears. I mean, is it a larger property like yours where you need an extension pole saw? All those things are available for homeowners if they need them.
That's good to know. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some of the biggest challenges you see people facing? Either your clients or, I mean, I'm sure you've got a yard too. So, what are some of the things that you find challenging?
My biggest challenge in my property is having time to work on it. I'm busy working on everybody else's. I have sort of the shoemaker syndrome on my property. It's I'm not working on everybody else's, making everybody else's property look nice. Meanwhile, mine it's faring okay, but not like I'd like it to.
Oh, it sounds
So,
familiar.
so yeah, I mean, some of the biggest challenges, for us, it is, and for most people, again, it's getting over. Speaking specifically just for electric, it's getting over that hurdle of understanding that, like we've repeated here, it's just that battery is as capable as gas, and what is it going to do to take that plunge? Now, if you are a homeowner and you're vetting a landscape contractor, there are certainly things that you should ask that contractor to make sure that you're getting somebody that's qualified to do this kind of work, whether it's battery powered equipment, or organic applications and ecological landscaping. There are certainly conversations that should be had in a homeowner speaking to a contractor should be able to educate themselves and have that dialogue with somebody, and understand that if somebody's trying to greenwash them, that they can pick out certain cues. Like, for example, I've spoken a couple times about soil. If a homeowner's vetting a contractor for organic turf applications, if that contractor comes and knocks on the door and says, "Hi, Shannon, we're here. We set up an appointment. We're going to talk about your organic turf management," and you ask them, "What are you going to do about the soil?" And they're like, "Well, we're not really going to do anything about the soil." Then you better keep looking for the contractor, because they're not organic. They may claim to be, and what a lot of those people will do is their organic, again, air fingers quote, their organic process may be putting down biosolids and corn gluten. That's what I see a lot with large companies, or any company that doesn't really understand the process. They'll shortcut it, and then they'll end up using synthetics to mask the wrongs that are happening. So it's definitely be, as a homeowner, you need to be knowledgeable, and do some research. Look at, for example, I can give you some names of groups like I mentioned, NOFA, the NOFA Organic, Northeast Organic Farming Association, NOFA.org. They have an organic land care standard that a homeowner could purchase. I mean, they can brush up on their jargon with that. The Rutgers Organic Land Care Best Management Practices Manual, and that's a quick little easy PDF that somebody can use to gain some knowledge. The education and proper education is probably the biggest hurdle out of everything, and how to glean what is appropriate and what's not, because there's so much nonsense out there. But certainly those couple of places that I mentioned, reading Doug Talmy, Benjamin Vogt, Claudia West, reading books on those people that are amazingly knowledgeable will help in a huge way. Yeah, education is the biggest hurdle, no doubt.
Education's always the answer because, well, for many reasons, but then education never ends. I mean, there's always more to learn. And education is so important, not just as the first step, but as a continual step, I think. And yeah, always learning there.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're, like, so you're transitioning to electric, and then let's say you want to try to include more native plants in your property. How do you go about doing that? Well, then, you're off searching Google again, and who knows what you're going to come up with, because again, there's regionality to that. Right. So, important factors there are, you can use the National Wildlife Federation, right? I mean, they have a great website that you can put your zip code in, and they can give you ecotypes right down to your zip code. So there's that. And then again, reading Dr. Talmy, he talks about keystone species. So if you're incorporating native plants into your landscape, the first thing you want to do is hopefully start with keystone species because that's going to get you the most bang for your buck. Um, I know you were on with my friends Tom and Fran on the Native Plant Healthy Planet podcast. And purple coneflower, right? I mean, they call it a gateway plant because once you start with that, you're off and running, right? So it's that yeah. So there's those kind of things. And again, I mean, if you start with the keystone species, oaks, things like that, solidago, goldenrod, asters, things like that. It's going to give they're good hardy plants. Again, as long as you put them in the right spot, and it'll give you a good start, and you'll see a lot of pollinator activity and things like that too. So
Yeah. And I mean, we're kind of transitioning to the next stuff that I want to talk about with some of those other things beyond just the equipment.
mm-hmm,
But yeah, we talk a lot on this podcast and also in my blog and on our YouTube videos about native plants and gardening with native plants because they are so important. And that is the basis of everything, are the plants, because the pollinators, they drink the nectar from the plants. The caterpillars eat the vegetation. The birds eat the caterpillars. There's all the other bugs that come in.
mm-hmm,
And just, I mean, it's all just this really complex web. And it's amazing and so interesting. And just like you said, one little thing leads to the next, to the next, to the next. And how important when we're talking about building those really sustainable landscapes, or I would call them miniature ecosystems almost, that we're putting in because we're trying to develop this, having it support everything.
mm-hmm.
It is so important. But yeah, what are some of the other things that you would recommend?
Well, I think the another important thing to remember too is you mentioned mini ecosystems, but I think outside of those mini ecosystems is we're trying to build some connectivity between these mini ecosystems because they've been destroyed. So I think that's again going back to Doug Talmy, his homegrown national park, that whole philosophy of one building block here, before you know it reaches all the way across the country because now we've started to make that connectivity of all those mini ecosystems, and they've expanded and made one great big ecosystem. It's interesting though, I think about this all the time, and there's we have our native grasslands, and we have in the Northeast it was a hardwood forest. We have prairies and things like that, and I think sometimes it's all well and good. However, if we continue, and I'm not saying not to do this, right? But if we continue in the Northeast to continue to plant prairie plants instead of we have to make sure we incorporate our hardwoods, because if we don't, we're changing our ecosystem from what it should have been to something that's completely different, right? We're shifting that original natural hardwood forest from the Northeast to something that's got more of a Midwest feel to it. So, yeah, we have native plants, we have different ecoregions within the Northeast, but I think, and I'm not saying we should not build our little mini ecosystems, don't get me wrong. Again, but I think it's important to know your regionality and not just incorporate perennials into your landscape. It's important to incorporate those hardwoods too, because like I mentioned, oaks and things like that, willows, cherries, those are keystone species, and they're just as important as the herbaceous material.
And in that case, to me, it comes down to really understanding what we mean by right plant in the right place.
Mm.
Because, I mean, you don't want to plant Midwestern plants that are native to the Midwest, but might not be native to your area. And it's not even just the state, because science and research and ecology is finding out that really a lot of what we thought was Eastern hardwood forest wasn't. And so we're losing species,
Mm-hmm.
birds, butterflies, other insects. I mean, plant species, because we've planted trees or allow trees to grow up in areas that for hundreds or thousands of years had other disturbance factors that were going on that aren't happening now.
Mm-hmm.
They've grown up into forest, and we think of them as forest because they've been that way for generations.
Mm-hmm.
And so That's what we think of now as being normal, but it wasn't. If you go back further into the ecological past. And so finding where those balances are, because there are also places that should be that old growth forest, and maybe they're pretty close to each other and
Hmm.
should be, like you're saying, those hardwood forests and the beeches and the maples and the willows and those keystone species. And it should be more of that. And so finding where those are and making sure you're planting right plant for the right place,
Hmm.
ecologically speaking. And that may not be the same as even two counties over,
Right.
because it really does make a difference once you start looking into the original ecosystems and we start looking at those biomes that were there and the communities that were there. And it does get complicated. And back to what we said before, there isn't a simple answer. And
Right.
for most of this, and when we start to dig in and ask the whys, it gets more and more complicated. And it can be overwhelming too. And I think that's something else that we have to struggle with
Mm.
and find that balance for, because we don't want to overwhelm people to the point where it's like, okay, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to do anything, or I'm just going to go
Right.
with traditional. That, because we don't
Right.
want to do that either. So it does get complex. There's not clear cut lines there, because we're also talking about our home landscapes, and that changes things a little bit more than maybe out in the pristine wilderness areas,
Hmm.
or as close to pristine wilderness as we've got in the eastern US.
That postage stamp size of wilderness that we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and it is difficult, and I think keeping another good thing for homeowners would be just to keep it simple, and it's hugely important to have a plan, not to just go in your backyard and start, pulling things out. You certainly have to have a plan on what you're once you take something out, what you're putting back in, and have it ready to put back in, because as soon as you take something out, Mother Nature is going to want to put something back in there, and 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be what you want. Um, the eco type and eco region and all that, it's kind of tricky, because I'm mentioning the things that I just did about regionality and you know northeast hardwood forest and planting too many prairie plants. It as a landscape designer, it limits your palette too. So there is that balance between finding what is a keystone species ecologically speaking, and what fits your design palette. So one of the things that I did is I sort of took you know a boundary of what we think is acceptable for us to plant as a native species. Like I said, most of our work is in central New Jersey, and if I stuck with plants that were just based in central New Jersey, my landscaping palette would be very, very small. Um, so, we don't typically plant non-natives. Maybe 1% of our planting a year might be non-natives. I mean, like, we very rarely, and we even try to steer away from cultivars, which is a whole other topic, right? But with that said, so we sort of picked a line from around the Mason-Dixon line, and then you go up, if you split the Great Lakes sort of in half, up to the Canadian border, and obviously to the Atlantic coast. That's sort of what I thought fit our native plant palette. Um, Knowing that, with that said, there will be things that if you put them in the wrong spot, even though they're native, they can be invasive. Like if you take our eastern red cedar and put them in the Midwest, they're a major problem, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure Kentucky, Shen, is where you're from, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know if they're a problem down in Kentucky or not, but you go out further, and our eastern red cedar is a big problem out there. So you need to be very careful with that, even though if you're drawing your parameters on what you think a native plant is, if you're not going to stick with that specific eco region prior to the settlers reaching our shores, if you're not going to stick with that and you're going to build some sort of parameters, you also need to understand that some of those plants that you may take from another region may be invasive, which is obviously another issue altogether.
Yes. And that's one of the hard things about native, is that you want things that are locally native to where you live. But let's face it, there's limited numbers of native species that are commercially available. And there's even a difference between commercially available at a level that, like, a landowner or a homeowner could get the seeds, grow a few seeds. Okay, yeah, I got a couple of plants that will work. And
Mm-hmm.
something that somebody's working on a commercial level, like what you are, who are trying to get, say, hundreds of the same plant,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got an even more limited palette there. That's even what's available. So there's lots of different options and angles here that's hard to do. And so, like, one of the things when I'm talking to people from other states, especially, I'll tell them, talk to your native plant societies,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to have a good idea, especially at the homeowner levels, what's available, what's actually native to your area, because there are plants that are native to Kentucky that are not native to New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
or native to Florida that definitely are not native to New Jersey or Maine or Kentucky.
Right.
There's some that are native to all those places. And yeah, it gets complicated because, like, even in Kentucky, we go from the Appalachian Mountains to the Mississippi River.
Mm.
There's a lot of difference between that area. And there are plants that are native to one part of the state and not the others,
Yeah, sure.
and vice versa. So, native is an important term, but it's also a very relative term.
Mm-hmm.
And we all talk about native at different scales. So, it's really something that's important, I think, to understand and talk about. And like you said, talking to your contractors, if you're working with a contractor, and what's their definition and how does that fit with what you're thinking? Or if you're a homeowner and you're trying to buy from a nursery, what's their definition of native and how does that fit with what you're trying to do? I mean, like you said, it's all education, and
Yeah.
there's a lot here.
Yeah, but it's all good.
Yes. Yes. And then that we're not even haven't even started talking about soils yet. And like you said, that is such an important
Yeah.
topic as well as the soil health.
Yeah. And that's a tough one for people to understand because they're so disconnected from that, right?
Well, the soil's hidden. You don't see it. We don't think about things we don't see. We
Well,
don't.
yeah, right. And when I started doing this, I started as a landscape team member. One of the first things my foreman taught me was dirt is what you get under your fingernails, and soil is what you plant plants in. And it took me forever to get that, to understand that. And then, like I said, in 2005 classes, soil biology. Now it's like, bacteria and fungi are my best friend.
Yeah, that makes me laugh because I almost said it's just dirt, isn't it?
Right. Yep. No, no, no. Those are dust bunnies underneath your dresser.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's so much soil life there, which makes me think I really need to do a podcast episode about some of the different soil microorganisms and what else going on below our feet. Because I mean, that is something that, like you said, we don't think about. We don't give it the credit that it
Mm-hmm.
needs and deserves, and it is so important.
Yep, totally.
So yeah, this has been really interesting and helpful, and just thinking about different things and learning about some of the other options that are out there and the capabilities of being able to just do that practical stuff like mow your yard or take care of your yard, or like you said, knowing questions to ask if you have somebody come in and do it for you, and finding those right landscape maintenance companies and crews,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm assuming if people are in the Princeton, New Jersey area, they can call you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, Princeton and surrounding areas. We do with AGSA, we do consulting um, throughout the Northeast, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Philadelphia. I've been speaking to somebody possibly about doing some consulting up in Rhode Island. So we're just trying to bring this message about ecological, organic, and low impact land care to as many people that will listen. Yeah, so it's been great, Shannon. If I could just mention our website and a couple of things where people get in touch with us, that would be great. So our website is mccoyfinegardens.com. Our social media is at McCoy Horticultural. That's Facebook and Instagram. And I'm on LinkedIn. We have a blog, Ecology Matters, and actually that might help your clients also. There is a blog post on there specifically about having a conversation with your prospective organic land care ecological contractor. So that could help folks in their conversations with those people. And agsa.net, the American Green Zone Alliance.net is where we do a lot of our battery powered education for folks. And then just real quick, I don't have a big vested interest in this, but Benjamin Vogt's new book, Prairie Up, that's coming out. We have actually your folks won't be able to see it, but you can see it. The picture is behind me on Zoom. That picture is in his book. So on page 70 of Benjamin Vogt's new book, Prairie Up is one of our gardens. So, and it's a rain garden. It's a 5,000 square foot rain garden, and over the course of 5 years, it will capture and infiltrate over 2 million gallons of water. So that's the other benefit to what we're doing is that green infrastructure and water capture and rain infiltration and whatnot. So, Shannon, I've appreciated this greatly. I hope some of the information I've given to you and your folks will be helpful. And again, I thank you greatly. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, it's been wonderful, and thank you. And yes, I will definitely have links in the show notes for all those websites and resources that you just gave. And then also, I mean, we were kind of half joking, half serious when we were talking about people contacting you in the Princeton area, but or greater Princeton area. But I mean, even people who are not in your local area,
Mhm.
if they've got questions and stuff, can they reach out and ask questions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am an open book. Absolutely. No problem.
That's what I kind of figured, but I wanted to make sure that everybody else recognized that too.
Yeah, not a problem.
Thank you so much for talking with us today. This has been really great. Thank you.
Grateful for the opportunity, Shannon. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
As I said at the beginning, lawn care equipment is not my area of expertise, and there's a lot I don't know about what's out there and the capabilities of that equipment. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I also know that others are struggling with finding and hiring a lawn care company who will work with them to make their yards as ecologically friendly as possible. I'm even more clueless about that because that's not something we've ever tried to do. So I really appreciate Richard sharing his expertise and experiences with us. I know I learned some things, and I hope that you did too. I also really appreciate the work that Richard does to make low-impact, ecologically friendly lawn care available, both through his own company and through the work he does at the industry level. It's not always easy to be a pioneer in your industry, but the work he is doing and the impact he is helping to make is very beneficial. If you are looking for some simple, quick, and easy ways to make your yard more attractive to pollinators and wildlife, you may want to check out my newest book, Attract Pollinators and Wildlife to Your Yard, 15 Free and Easy Ways. I'll have a link in the show notes where you can learn more about the book and place your order. Until next week, I encourage you to take some time to enjoy the nature in your own yard and community.